Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a quick moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. Mission Admissions cuts through the noise in college admissions and recruitment. Host Jeremy Tiers brings a fresh perspective, packing each episode with straight talk advice, tips, and strategies from a mix of pros inside and outside higher ed. One of the things I love most about the show is how Jeremy often brings voices from outside the industry to share perspectives and practices that can be applied to the work that marketers and enrollment professionals like you do every day. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Mission Admissions wherever you get your podcasts.
Exactly. It's almost like thinking about meta of the DMV. It's almost the exact same scenario. You might have a really long line that you have to wait in. It's going to be a slow process, but once you get to the front of that line, once you provide the proper documentation, 99% of the time, they're going to get you your driver's license or your account back in this case.
Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager, a podcast that addresses the do's, don'ts, and dynamics of the digital ecosystem specific to higher education. I'm your host, Li Fowler. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education social media management and marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Hello, friends. I am delighted to introduce you to Adrienne Kemp-Rye, who is the social media manager at Stanford University, where she manages day-to-day operations of the institutional channels, produces social-first content, and provides strategy advice to campus communicators. Adrienne, thank you so much for your time.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Jenny. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted for you to be on. So let us know, tell our audience how you got into higher ed social media.
Yeah, of course. I will actually back it up a little bit. And it might be a little bit of a long-winded story, but I think it will preface me as a social media manager and my approach and sort of how I got to where I am today. And it seems a little bit dramatic, but I think my career in social actually started looking at an apartment building when I was 18 years old. And I looked at this apartment building and it was like my dream space. It was, as somebody who's interested in architecture and interior design, it filled those boxes. But of course, as an 18-year-old, I had a very small budget. I had no money. And I looked at the price of the building and it was more than quadruple what I could afford. But
we've been there.
Exactly. But me being me, that did not stop me. I thought about, what are the other ways that I could pay for this apartment? I envisioned myself living there. I was really motivated for wanting to be in that space. So I thought about it. And this was in the early days of social, of it rising, and had started to dabble in it. So I thought, why not pitch a social media content plan to the landlord and say, I'll give you this social media services in exchange for monthly rent? And it wasn't quite that simple. I emailed him. I said, can I just have 5 minutes of your time? I want to pitch you on this idea I have. And being an 18-year-old, I thought that you showed up to a business meeting in a suit with a portfolio and everything mapped out. So I show up and I do exactly that. I pitch this social media idea, and to my shock, and I'm sure especially to my parents' shock, as I told them this grand idea I had, he accepted. He said, I believe in you and let's do this.
No, I love this story. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started, my original pitch was to do social media for the apartment building, but As we got talking, it turned out he owned the local beauty college, and he said, let's take exactly your idea and have you do it for the beauty college. So I did that for almost 3 years, and it was the perfect arrangement to start building my experience in social, but also live in this dream apartment. And I felt so fortunate that that was my intro to the industry. And around that same time, I was also working as a dress consultant at a small business. And so I saw the impact that social had, and it's starting to skyrocket, especially in the business sense of what an impact it can have. So I started doing social in this small business formal wear store, and it really took off. I ended up working there for 7 years, and by the time I left, we were at 13,000 followers. And as a small business in West Virginia, that is like just huge. And it was such a, both of those two experiences early on in my career was just to this day one of the luckiest things that could happen to me. It allowed me to experiment, to try things, to do every element of social, from crop styling to photo shoots to ambassador programs to just all of these different things, and see all the different impacts it can have on social. And so then from there, I sort of like bounced around to a couple other places. And my first dose of higher education was at West Virginia University. It was during the pandemic. It was such an interesting time to enter the higher education space, and in a time when social was so crucial in a variety of messaging needs. It was public safety, but it was also harnessing community and all of these other things. And it's actually a shock that I didn't wander my way to higher education before that. My family has a long history with higher education and being in the education space. So I really felt at home in that position. I loved working in the beauty college and the formal wear store, but in higher education, I think probably because of how I was raised, I just felt, like I said, right at home. It fulfilled both my professional and personal aspirations. And it wasn't until a couple years later when I was working as a marketing associate at Crate and Barrel, working on their social channels. And I was loving what I was doing there, getting to experiment in areas that I hadn't yet explored, things like influencer marketing and building out campaigns in a variety of verticals, and really trying out these other spaces of the social industry. But I had this realization that I love higher education, the community around it, the students that you're messaging, all these other things just made me realize I want to be back in the higher education space. And that's when Stanford opened, that door opened, and I've been here ever since, and going on my 2-year anniversary. So very much in my infancy of this position, but feel so lucky to be in this role. And it's just been such a pleasure and joy. And yeah, that's kind of how I've wandered and come to this space where I am now.
I love that origin story. My goodness. And like an 18-year-old that like bartered her way into getting like a fabulous like corner apartment, or at least that's how I'm seeing it, with like tall windows and high ceilings. I love that story.
Yeah, it was I look back now and I'm like, I don't know who would trust an 18-year-old with this pitch, but I think somebody that was as confident as I was in wanting to give things a try, and wasn't afraid to experiment.
I think the fact that you went in there like prepared too, with a suit and a portfolio and all of that, I think helped. That's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that story with us. But yeah, let's get into the nuts and bolts of why we're together today. So you have an intern position dedicated to helping affiliates with locked out accounts. Like, I remember you mentioning this, and I just honed in on it. I was like, wow, that is like crazy. So like, what motivated you to take this step?
Yeah. I'll back up a little bit further to just briefly talk about our overall intern program. I think we're really lucky in the sense that we have a really great internship program. We have about 7 interns at the moment, and just feel so lucky to have all these wonderful minds on our team that are curious and passionate and want to contribute to our space. And so with that many people sort of in all the specific areas of the intern program, whenever I look at their different skills and talents, we try to find very specific areas and projects for them to work on. That way they feel purposeful and know that they have a regular thing that they're working towards. And it's very much a stable environment of, you know what you have to do each week. It's this reoccurring project, which I think helps both of us. Like I couldn't come up with new things every week. It would be probably a little bit overwhelming to get that on the other end of things, especially knowing my experience as an intern. That's what I appreciated the most, having something that I really felt fulfilled by. So whenever we look at all these different contributors, we really assess what are their strengths and weaknesses. Some people are really good at the administrative tasks. Some people are really good at content creation. Some people more creative, whatever it might be, and kind of subbing them into those areas, letting them experiment, of course, with the other areas, but having that dedicated space. So as we turn to all these different spaces, we think about things like request forms with content calendars, all these other things that are the perfect place for an intern to come in and assist and be a part of our workflow. So as we were building this out about, I guess it's been almost a year and a half ago, and around that same time that we were coming up with these different sectors, I was noticing an increase in locked out Meta accounts, Instagram, Facebook, more specifically. And a part of my role, which you said at the beginning, is working directly with our campus partners here at Stanford. So it's really looking at our main account as a part of a whole. So we, of course, have our main account, but these different accounts on campus, departments, schools, units, whatever it might be, we can't have a flourishing main account unless we have all the other different contributors adding up to our overall impact on social channels. So we noticed that there were these, there was an uptick in locked out accounts. And that, of course, is not good for both the account manager as well as us. That's an impact in our overall footprints on the space. So I was working to try to assist in whatever way I could to get people's accounts resolved, to help find other strategic areas that they could have an impact on while they were locked out. And as more and more accounts got locked out, it became so clear that we needed more people to help manage which accounts have been flagged already, which ones are ongoing, which ones have been on the back burner for a while, all of these different things, almost having a project manager on a very micro project, but it also not being a micro project. It's a very large project because so many people are impacted by that.
Yeah, it's a big issue. I mean, it happens so often. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is. Yeah, such a big issue. So I think it's been instrumental to have an intern assisting in this and having them be the expert on, oh, hey, this account has been locked out for several weeks now. Let's reflag that. Let's keep, pinging whoever we can and get an answer on that, as well as somebody for the communicators to talk to. So of course I'm there, but there are so many different areas that my hands are in.
Totally. And you're better utilized for strategy and advising leadership and things like that. So I get it. And I love this idea of dedicating a person, a more of an entry level person maybe, to help with this. So
yeah, because it's so frustrating to be in a scenario like that. And you want, of course, somebody that's helping to resolve it. And that's what me and our team of interns are here to do. But also having somebody who can look at what you're seeing and say, oh, have you tried this yet? Or I know that this worked for somebody else. Have you gave this a shot? And having somebody almost there as another person to talk to and to be there. And especially as the interns have become more aware of the different elements of the process, they become better and better at knowing, oh, they haven't tried this yet, or let's give this a shot.
Totally.
So it's been such a great collaborative effort.
Yeah, it's so because honestly, you and I could be doing that all day. I mean, obviously, you have someone doing it all day. So let's get into what are some of the most frequent commonalities that you have found in these locked out incidents.
Yeah, I wish I could nail it down to just one thing, a light switch that you could turn, and as long as you're doing that, you're good to go.
There's like so many reasons, right? So many reasons you can
so
get
many
locked out of an
reasons.
account.
Yeah, I'll run through a couple commonalities that I've seen that may or may not have an impact on whether or not that's the reason for your lockout, but I think are almost what I would view as best practices. And if you're following these things, it, I would say, would decrease your chances of a lockout because you are following those best practices. And of course, this is not foolproof. Anything of what I say here, we have accounts that are still locked out to this day. It's not.
Right. It's not a guarantee. I know it's not an exact science. It's true. It's like you just have to figure out every case as you go, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But of all the cases that we've seen, I think we've had at this point probably nearly 24 cases. And some of the common things that I see are like really just looking at your account health. So things like, are you listed as a business account? You should not be listed as a personal account. You should have a business. That business account as well, especially with Instagram, should be linked to a Facebook business account as well. Having those things merge, that helps with making sure that you're a respected entity, that you're not impersonating a business. That's oftentimes where that comes into being flagged. Then also looking within the settings of, do you have two-factor authentication turned on? Are you following other best practices, like making sure that you're not using copyrighted music that has commercial sounds in it? Are you posting something that maybe is duplicated content that has been shared elsewhere that could be flagged as you trying to steal other content? Because ultimately, I'm very sad that people get locked out of their account, and I absolutely don't want to justify the reason for people being locked out. But if you look at it from Meta's perspective, which it's not a specific person on their team doing this, at least to my knowledge, it's an automated bot. It's something that's being flagged in their algorithm or whatever it might be. And from their point of view, it's more so, how can they protect their platform? There are so many bots out there. There are people spamming and things like that. So that's ultimately what they're looking for. So anything that might push your account into that category, I think is what ultimately gets flagged.
That's a really great point. I think, if you are exhibiting active human behavior in your account, I think that's something that's helpful. That's a really great point.
But with that too, there are plenty of accounts that I've seen that aren't doing any of those things. They're doing all the right things. I look at their account and I have no clue why they might be flagged and why they might be locked out. It's just for whatever reason. It's falsely been flagged, and that is really unfortunate for those accounts. So absolutely, if a listener is running into this scenario, I wouldn't blame yourself or
oh yeah,
or feel
it happens to the best of us. These things, but there are some lessons that we've learned along the way, which is thankfully why we're having this conversation. I will add, like, Stanford is one of the lucky ones. You do have like a representative at Meta. Not all of us do. Like MIT, we do not have a representative at Meta, so it's not like that you're a big name school and then you automatically have a rep. So that's helpful in some cases, but again, not all of us have that. But there are routes that you can go and take if you do get locked out, even if you don't have a representative. Can you talk to us about that a little bit, Adrienne?
Of course. And a lot of times not going through a rep is actually what resolves the situation on its own. Going through those built-in mechanisms, because they also recognize that this is an issue and is happening to a lot of accounts. So the first step that I always recommend is, if you experience an account lockout, something should pop up on your screen that says something like, appeal this announcement or whatever it is. Click that as the first point of action. And it will guide you through the different things that they need on their end to better assess whether or not your account should remain flagged or if this was a mishap. And providing that first step is one of the most crucial parts of the process in making sure that you are making clear that you are an official account, making sure that you provide things like your driver's license to prove that you're a real human and not a bot, adding proper documentation that you are the entity that you say you are. So business documentation, copyright and trademarks, licensing agreements, things that you might partner with from like a brand side of your department. Getting all of that documentation together so that whenever you submit it, you have everything that proves that you are legitimate. It might ask for a couple other things as well, like maybe do you have any media mentions, pulling in really reputable news outlets that show you are who you say you are, and especially from like a blue check perspective, they're wanting to make sure that you're not at risk of impersonation.
Yeah.
So
I think one time I was asked for like an electric bill, like something that had your address and your name on it. And that proved to be a little bit of a conundrum because I was like, I don't have I don't pay the electric bill for MIT. But yes, you are asked for this documentation. And sometimes it seems odd, but they're just wanting to confirm that you are who you say you are.
Exactly. It's almost like thinking about Meta of the DMV. It's almost the exact same scenario. You might have a really long line that you have to wait in. It's going to be a slow process, but once you get to the front of that line, once you provide the proper documentation, 99% of the time, they're going to get you your driver's license or your account back in this case.
I love that metaphor. It's true. And it can be a long line. It's so true.
It can be a long line and everybody's waiting for the same thing. They want it to work out for you. You want it to work out for you. Everybody's really on the same team. And that's what you have to remember at the core of it. So after you've taken this step and you've gone through that part of things, then I cross my fingers. I hope that does the trick. But of course, there's also the scenario where for whatever reason, they don't accept your appeal. And then it's like, what do I do from there? So from there, I normally point to Meta Support Pros, which if you Google, it should come up with a system. And if you're a business account, you have access to Meta Support Pros. And then there you can start a chat with an agent and they'll try to help you from there. A lot of times they're just like the agents that you get on whatever e-commerce site you're buying your kids' equipment from or whatever it is. It's a similar scenario where you really have to break things down and be clear in what your issue is, and they're going to help you to resolve it from there. So that's normally my other approach, try to go through that route. And
screenshots help if you take screenshots along the way, because they usually let you attach screenshots as well. So I find that helpful.
Definitely. Having that stuff on file is always helpful to have things that you can continue to reference from whenever you did have account access. Having things on file like your account ID or your business manager ID, all of those details, having it on file, and maybe even going old school and writing it down and putting it in your desk so that you can reference that. I think having all of that stuff proactively is great. And that's probably the other element of our approach at Stanford, because we've had such an influx in these lockouts. We have instead sort of flipped it from a reactive approach, which we're still actively doing because unfortunately these things continue to pop up, but trying to approach it in how can we get ahead of this? On campus, we have a Slack channel that's dedicated to communicators who work within the social media space. And there are about 200 people in this Slack channel where we regularly communicate about whatever it is related to social. It could be something very minor to things going on campus that impacts all of our accounts, whatever it might be. It's a space to communicate. And a lot of times we drop in updates related to these account lockouts, especially beginning of this year, maybe January or February, when we were really at the height of account lockouts. We had many open cases. They weren't being resolved. It was frustrated to everyone involved. So we tried to get ahead of it and send out a message and say, hey, let's make sure that everybody is following the following items. And just like the things we talked about earlier, making sure that everybody's account was a business account, not a personal account, making sure that you have all of the security set up, like Duo and all those different elements. And then reminding people we're actively here. We're here to help your situation. And we appreciate your patience for those of you who are still experiencing it. So we included that there, as well as in our social media snapshot that we send out on a quarterly basis that runs through a variety of different landscape updates, usually more nitty-gritty things like Instagram released whatever new update, or did you see MIT doing this really cool post? Maybe you want to mimic it, all these different things. And then a lot of times at the bottom, we have some sort of a reminder, and it can be, of course, a variety of different things. But in our most recent one, we included an update on lockouts to make sure that we're getting it out to as many people as possible, that everybody's double checking their accounts to make sure that they're not. I think a lot of times we all have the best intentions, and then you give it a look and you're like, I could have swore I turned Duo on, but for whatever reason I didn't. So it sort of is this nice built-in mechanism to just have checks and balances in place, have people triple checking whatever it might be. So I think we've seen a little bit of a decrease in account lockouts. So I think that's certainly helped, but of course, an ongoing process as we try to have as little account lockouts as possible.
That's super smart. I'm stealing that. I have a newsletter too, so I'm going to put some helpful tips to prevent lockouts. I think that's an awesome idea. Okay, so Adrienne, say all this. The worst case scenario happens, and you lose the account, which has happened. What are the options? What are our options?
Yeah, I think there are definitely options here, and if you find yourself in that scenario, definitely a heartbreaking moment to have something that you poured so much work into and feel like it just went poof. So I think we're really empathetic in how frustrating that can be. So that's the first part of it. You have to get past that frustration and know that that's a very real, that's a feeling that should be validated, because that is frustrating. But after we've gotten past that, then it's kind of, you have to approach it and there's nothing we can really do about this. We'll fight as long as we can, but then at a certain point we have to accept the reality. And of course, it's hard to look at the positive side of things, but I think there is a silver lining in this. And it's a chance to really reflect on your social strategy. There are so many social platforms out there, and I think a lot of times everyone in the world of social wants to hop on every train that pops up. You want to get going on all the different things that are evolving in the space. And I don't think that that's always the case. There are different platforms that serve different purposes, and especially for maybe departments or units or things that are a subsidiary of a larger institution, maybe focusing on what is your ultimate goal. And a lot of times I think that it's not all the platforms that are going to service that goal, as well as the majority of communicators that I talk to, their role involves 5 other things. They're leading email marketing, they're the web person, they're wearing all of these different hats. So trying to do all of that.
They're supporting faculty. Yeah.
Exactly. So trying to do all of that on top of whatever we're at this point, 6 platforms, that's a lot on one person's plate. So I think it gives you the chance to say, we're talking about meta account lockout specifically, were those accounts serving you? Were you seeing results? Were you seeing engagements or follows or reach or whatever your specific goal is? And maybe you weren't. And then we start from ground, whatever the saying is, ground zero, and we work back up from there. Or we look at it and we say, well, you have a LinkedIn presence that's doing really, really well. So maybe let's try devoting all of our energy there and keeping that momentum going rather than starting from the ground floor. If you feel like, yes, we want to reopen these Instagram and Facebook accounts, then from there, I would really focus on how do you grow that account back up. So that's really a grassroots effort whenever you're starting with so little followers. So I think really thinking about how can we have the maximum impact. So things like partnering with other accounts at your institution, doing collaborative posts, tagging, doing features and tagging the person that you're featuring and making sure that it's seen on their profile as well. Doing those things where you're slowly building that audience and you're doing things that are very intentional in getting your account in front of as many eyes as possible rather than just shooting in the dark. If you're posting a graphic to 10 followers, it's really hard to continue growing from there. It's how do you pick up? How do you get that?
How are you even serving your audience if that's what you're doing? No, I love this advice because sometimes I think people don't even know why. They don't know what the goals are. They just say, I don't know. I've inherited this Facebook account and I don't know why we're doing it. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity to like re-ask those questions. Like, why are you on it? If you don't know, maybe you don't need to be doing it.
Exactly.
Like if you don't know if you don't know what the why is. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe you don't need your own dedicated presence, but you can still get your message out to that platform by, like, say, for example, I run like the Stanford surgery account. I don't run this account, but I'm not even sure if this account exists. But if I ran that account, maybe I would think of what is my natural partner in this? And in that case, probably the Stanford School of Medicine. So then maybe I go to that partner and I say, we have 2 strategic messages that we want to get out this year. We would love to use your audience to target 2 specific posts within the calendar year. And then you work together and it's a win-win. They have a much larger audience and they have an impact, as well as you're being very straightforward in what your goal is. You have these 2 things that you want to get across and you're going to deliver it to that many people rather than, especially in the world of social, there's an overwhelming amount of information where things get lost and it's hard to get whatever strategy that you're going for.
The algorithm works against you. Yeah, all the things.
Exactly. And this is something I encourage, whether or not you experience that account lockout, constantly reassessing what are the pros and cons to the areas that I'm in. And that's something we do from a main account perspective as well. Should we be on whatever platform, or this new platform, would that serve us in what it is? And constantly doing that, I think, makes for a really excellent social media strategy and making sure that you're getting the results that you deserve.
Totally. I love the focus of looking at it as an opportunity. I think that's a really nice way to look at it. So I know that I feel like you've been sprinkling these in throughout, but so like in a summarization, maybe like what are some of the big lessons that we've learned?
Yeah, I think the first lesson is so many people are going through this. So know that you are not alone. And I guarantee 1 in every 5 social media managers has experienced this. So you have someone you can go to empathize in what you're experiencing. And that is one of the most important things for anything. Having somebody you can partner with who knows exactly the scenario that you're in and having that person that you can work through it with. The second, really making sure that you are keeping track of your best practices and that you're constantly double checking that you are following all of the different things that our social accounts should be at to be at like 100% health level, really double checking and making sure that you're doing everything in that aspect. And then I think the third thing is really just to, if you experience that worst case scenario, to look at it in a positive way, which is, of course, hard to do whenever you're in such a sticky situation. But it's kind of making the best of the worst and taking lemons, turning into lemonade, whatever it might be. And then the last thing, which I don't think we've touched on this yet, but something that I think is so important for anything meta related, is that there are so many people out there who are trying to use Meta's name to hack your account, to take advantage of the system, whatever it might be. On a daily basis, I get emails from people who are impersonating Meta support pros, Meta reps, other Meta entities, like reading everything 5 times, seeing if it's actually a real thing or if it's a phishing thing. You have to
look at the email account, if it doesn't say at Meta,
yeah, just looking at any form of communication you're getting from Meta and really being vigilant in, is this an actual Meta representative or is it somebody that is trying to fool you? And they're very sneaky. They use the same logo. They communicate in similar ways. They'll message you on Messenger just like Meta support pros will. And a lot of times whenever I'm talking to communicators who are experiencing these lockouts or whatever other issue, and they'll send me screenshots. Is this real? Is this actually from a Meta person? And a lot of times I think communicators are like, I'm so sorry I'm asking this question. Like, I should know that. And that's one of the biggest things I can say is don't apologize for asking if this is the real deal. For something like that, absolutely ask the question, have somebody else take another look to make sure that you're talking to a real person, especially before you give out information like your driver's license, your account number, whatever else it might be, because it oftentimes can result in a hack. And I think I saw recently that there was a social media manager of a major school. I can't remember which one, and I don't want to draw more attention to a terrible situation. But they came out and they said, I learned a lot from this, and I didn't think that this could happen to me, and it did. And being aware of that, I think, is so important for social media managers everywhere. And I think most of us are aware, but being hyper aware that this could happen to any of us, and it's such a terrible situation to be in, to be careful and slow things down whenever you are having those conversations to make sure that you're not giving out information.
Yeah. And, I would add, don't be embarrassed because it has happened to so many people. Like, there's so many people that have been are victims of this, that just reach out and ask for help, I think.
Exactly. Be mindful of everything going on. I think that's something we do regularly on our team. If we see new login from whatever computer, and in your head, you might be like, oh, that's definitely Adrienne logging in from Chicago. Let's double check and make sure that it was indeed. And even recently, I got a notification with a code for my Facebook account, and I didn't request it. And so I immediately went in, changed my password, made sure everything was good, especially because my personal account is linked to the Stanford University account. It's a direct bridge, and I think social media managers everywhere, we wake up in like cold sweats at night from a nightmare where your account got hacked.
Yes, or locked. Yes, and I would add to, like, our team. If it's me that's logging in from somewhere, we immediately send a follow-up email to that email, because there's more than one of us that have access to it, and I'll say, this is me, so don't worry. Yeah, so we'll like tell each other it's me logging in. So, so we don't have to fret about what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah. I think there are so many memes out there of this general experience we all have of, hey, can you give me that code, or whatever it might be? And it's definitely a situation where there are absolutely no dumb questions. I fully encourage as many questions as you can, and back to the beginning of our conversation, having more people who can help chat through these things, having a team who is working very closely with me, who have seen all of these situations and can help assess in all of these, very minute details of the general experience on social platforms, and having people who can triage and act as almost like our own in-house customer service. I think it's really, really beneficial.
Yeah. Yes, I've learned so much. Thank you so much, Adrienne. But before I let you go, I always ask this of all of my guests, is what is your confession?
I think I can make a lot of social media confessions, but I'll narrow it down. I'll narrow it down to one. And I think that this confession would have shocked me if I heard myself a year ago making this. But my favorite platform currently is LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. This year, it's been such a high growth area. It harnesses such wonderful, fruitful conversations. There's direct payoff. It's reaching all the people that we want to reach. Everyone is like, if I go through the comment section, like sometimes I tear up forgetting how positive comments can be and how people will take the post and understand it and comment back and add to that conversation. And it's almost like Reddit, the comment sections often in LinkedIn, people talking to one another, talking to the post, even our two most recent posts as of this conversation. One specifically was about one of our graduates from this year's commencement was 105 years old and graduated with her master's degree, which is, of course, a wonderful, wonderful story. So I'm not that surprised that it picked up as well as it did, but there are more than 2 million impressions, 60,000 likes, hundreds of comments of people talking about how lovely it is to see things like this. And I think that it was such a good reminder to close out the year of do not count out those platforms that are oftentimes, you kind of think of them as the stepchild or whatever it might be. You really think about them and how rewarding they can be. So that's my confession. I love LinkedIn. I'm so excited to see where the platform goes, especially I think that we've seen so many faculty members transition into that space and have their own presence as well as our own institutional presence. So it's been an exciting year to see that take off. And yeah, all for LinkedIn.
I love it. And this, we are not sponsored, by the way. This is
absolutely not sponsored. No sponsored. If LinkedIn would like to hit me up and I'll be the newest LinkedIn influencer.
You can find her on LinkedIn.
You can find me on LinkedIn.
There you go. Thank you so much, Adrienne. This was seriously such a helpful episode. And thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jenny. It's been a pleasure. I'm so thankful for this community and for these nuggets of information that we can share to make it a better space for all of us.
Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Mallory Wilsey, and so many others of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.